Hey there everyone. So today we are going to learn the basics of C Sharp. In this video I'm going to teach you most of C Sharp so that at least you can get started with coding in C Sharp right away after watching this video. So the way I have structured this series or tutorial is in a way that even if you are an experienced developer, you will not feel bored, and if you are someone who is learning to code, you will not feel that you need to know advanced resources in order to understand what is going on in this particular tutorial. So this is the landing page of C Sharp resources from Microsoft. So bookmark this link. I'm going to leave this link in the video description as well. So if you have any sort of doubts or you want to get to the reference material related to C Sharp, this is the destination, so just bookmark it. Okay, now everything that I'm going to teach today is uploaded on GitHub at this particular repository, so you simply can clone it and run most of the programs. Having said that, let's dive right into learning C Sharp. So the very first step you have to do is to install the .NET Core on your machine. So here is this big button. You click on this button and you will be taken directly to the download portion. From here you can install the .NET SDK. You need the SDK, not the runtime. Okay, once you have that, you can run commands like .NET new, and this will help you in creating a new .NET project. Now if you have watched my earlier video, you might have seen these type of applications you can create using this .NET CLI command. But in this video, we are not going to create anything new. If you want to create a new application, the command is .NET new console. Because in today's video, we are going to be learning the concepts of C Sharp, not the concepts of ASP.NET. So we are going to strictly stick to the console part. We are going to learn the intricacies of C Sharp. Okay, so I have already done this part for you and I have already uploaded whatever the outcome was after writing my code. Here on GitHub you can simply download it. Let me demonstrate it. So git clone, and this will download the repository on your machine. Okay, so where it is, this is the project, most of C Sharp. Okay, and let's open this thing in VS Code, right? So let me also show you the arrangement of chapters. So all of the concepts are arranged in these chapters. Okay, so you have got these numbers, string and types chapter, then you have got object oriented programming chapter, and then there are some miscellaneous chapters as well where deals with the day-to-day activities you are going to do with C Sharp. So how can you run this thing? I will demonstrate it right away. So you do .NET run, and this will simply run the project for you. You do not have to do anything apart from having .NET installed on your machine. So let's start with writing our simplest program, that is the Hello World program. So let's first of all understand what's going on here. So let me remove these things. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. So the namespace part. So it is basically like a logical collection of things. If you have seen Java, this is more like the package part. So when you want to put certain things in a package or you want to label certain things under a particular name, you use this term namespace. So our application has this namespace, most of C Sharp, which is basically the top level namespace, and you can name whatever you want to, right? So I just want to namespace this program under this most of Sharp namespace, right? So I just want to put this thing under this most of C Sharp namespace. I did that by writing this thing. Okay, so the actual name of my file is most of C# .program. Okay, so it's a logical grouping. Then comes this class part. Now, in every C# program or in every .NET program, you need to have this program which contains a main method. So this main method is the entry to your application, and this one is the main method. Now, static is there because when the .NET framework calls your program, it is not going to instantiate a new class. Okay, it is just going to call the main method directly from the program. That is why the method has been marked static. On top of that, it is not going to return anything to the .NET runtime, hence the void thing, because the void represents that it is not going to return anything. And this is the main program, and the .NET framework looks for this main function. And then you can also provide some runtime arguments to the main function, which you can process later on in the body of your function. Okay, so let's start by writing the hello world program. So in order to do that, you have to do console.writeLine and hello world. So a couple of things here. This is how you create strings in C#. This is a system library which is available under the namespace of system. So you need to import it by using this thing. So using is a reserved keyword which is used for importing other libraries or namespaces. Okay, so when you import this thing, console gets imported as well. Then you can use console in your program. So console has this method writeLine which writes to the console. So now we are going to run this program, .NET run, and there are errors because at the end of every line or statement you need to put a semicolon. That is a convention in C#, and without it your program will not execute and it will throw errors. Now let's run it, and here is our hello world. Okay, now there are a couple of ways to output things. So let's suppose I want to write my name here. How can I do that? We are going to look at strings later on, but I am going to demonstrate it right away. So I'm going to create a new variable name. This is how you create a string variable, Rajat. Okay, and then in here I'm going to put this name variable inside these curly braces, and outside this string I'm going to put this $sign. So this converts the normal string into the string template. Now this string template gets processed before creating an output, which means that this name variable will be substituted here. And the way to identify a string template is by identifying this thing right before the start of the double quotes. Okay, so this is the string template or the string interpolation. Okay, it says again I have done the error because C# is not my first language. I have recently learned it, so I am committing these mistakes. I am basically coming from JavaScript land and I am not really into typing semicolons. So hello Rajat. There is one more way to output things on the console. Let's suppose I have two variables. Now I also have an int variable of age. Okay, I want to output these two things. How can I do that? We can also use something like placeholders. Okay, so hello Rajat, and again the new placeholder. Now for placeholders we are going to use the relative positions 0 and 1. So right after this I'm going to put a comma and write name, and then a comma and then age. So it is going to substitute name at this 0th place and age at this 1th place. Let's run this program, and we have got our output. So we have seen three ways of producing information on the console. Now let's dive into the types part. Okay, So in order to run these programs, you need to call the run methods from their respective classes. So if I want to run this bool program, all I have to do is to import this bool thing from this namespace and then call the run method without creating or instantiating the bools class, because the method has been marked static, which means that I do not have to really create an instance of the class. Okay, so let's start with numbers, because those are the most basic types you are going to use in your day-to-day program. Now, some information about types. Why do we need types? So types basically help you in specifying some meta information about any variable. So types can tell the compiler how to optimize this variable further, how and where to store it, and how to process it further so that your program can run faster and you can get to see any logical errors as fast as possible. So types can help us in doing that. So there are many types in C#. Here are some of the basic types. So let's start with the number type. Okay, so again, this is the stuff we have already talked about, and here comes how you define a integer type. Okay, so there are other types as well in C# that are of type number, and let me show you C# number types. Okay, so there are many types as you can see here. So these are known as integral numeric types. Okay, so this is how you define an integer. This is how you produce it to the output. And again, we have seen this thing. Now every integer numeric type has this thing known as minimum value or the maximum value. Okay, so there are many integral numeric types, and you can use any of those based upon the range of the number you are trying to store in that variable. So here are the ranges listed against the types. Okay, so if I want to store a number which falls in this particular range, I have to use uint or long or ulong and things like that. Okay, so min value and max value is how you can get to the extremes of the range of any type. Okay, so this is the type and this is the min value. And then if you want to initialize an integer variable by a hexadecimal value, this is how you do it. So you basically place your hexadecimal code and you prefix it with this 0x. Okay, similarly, if you want to create an integer variable and assign a binary value to it, you just put the binary value and then prefix it with this thing. So this will create or initialize the integer variable with the binary value. Okay, on top of that, we also have some floating points and decimal types. So float is one, then we have got double, and then we have got decimal. Okay, so float has a smaller range, then for bigger range you are going to use doubles, and then decimal, it is an interesting thing. So decimal basically has more precision and less range, which means that this thing is lesser as compared to the double, but this part is more as compared to the double thing. Okay, so let me show you. So in order to run this program, we have to do, first of all, we have to get rid of this thing, and then we have to first of all import our program. So it's going to be most of C#, and then types. Okay, and then here you are going to call the numbers. Okay, I think these are under chapters. Okay, most of C#, then chapters, then types. Okay, then numbers and run. This is how you can run the program. Okay, here is the output. So let me show you what I was talking about. Okay, so in order to create a float variable, you have to assign the value and suffix it with an F. So that will tell the compiler that it's a float value. If you want to create a double value, you can just simply write the value, or you can also suffix it with the D thing. Okay, or you can also do this. I mean your value and then D. Okay, but you can skip the D in this part, and for decimal you have to place this M. Okay, one more thing about the decimal is that it cannot be mixed with floats and doubles. Okay, so here I have printed the values, as you can see here. So in the output you are not going to see these F's and M's, and I was talking about the double and decimal, and I told you about the range part, right? Let's see this thing. So here I am dividing 1 by 3. The only difference between these two lines is the types of the variables. So here we are dividing the double digits, and here we are dividing the decimal digits. So as you can see, here we have got lesser precision and we have got more precision over here. So this is the decimal part. So when you are dealing with situations where you need more precision, you are going to use the decimal thing instead of double. When you want to produce more range, that is this part before the decimal, you are going to use the double. Okay, so with this knowledge about numbers, you can get by easily when it comes to your day-to-day coding. Now let's move on to the other type, that is the Boolean type. Okay, so this is how you create a Boolean variable. A Boolean variable is used to be used in making decisions based on the value that is stored inside a Boolean variable. So a Boolean variable can only store two types of values. The first one is the true value and the second one is the false value. Okay, so if you want to write a condition where you want to decide whether to process the logic or not based on the value that is stored inside a variable, a bool variable can serve that purpose. So in that particular case, you can create a bool variable. Okay, so this is how you write tertiary or ternary conditionals. So basically you put the condition and then you place this, what can I say, question mark. Okay, and then the part that should be executed when the condition is true, then a semicolon, I mean the colon, and then the part that should be executed when the condition is not true. Okay, so here we have not put any executable code but only the strings. So it is going to produce strings as an output, and those strings can be assigned to anything. Okay, so basically this is normal programming stuff. If you are coming from any programming language, you might have seen this thing. So this is how you use booleans in a conditional, and this is also how you use the if statement. You do not have to place a curly brace right after the if statement if there is only one statement, but if you have got more statements to process after the if condition holds true, then you have to put a semicolon. Okay, and these are the logical operators. So basically this is the AND operator. So if you want to combine something, you have to use these operators AND and OR, right? So this one is the AND and this one is the OR operator, and then you can also output the variable and it is going to simply state true or false. Now one thing to note here is that there is something known as operator precision. So if you are writing a complex statement where you are ANDing and ORing things and you are producing some output based on complex conditionals, which means that you are using certain Boolean values and you are combining them in order to get to a result. In that particular case, you are going to either AND two or more condition or two or more conditions. Like you can see here, right? So you need to take care of operator precedence, right? So this thing is having more precedence, which means that this thing, if this thing is there, this thing will be processed first, and then this output will be odd to this thing. Okay, so in order for you to first of all produce the output of this and then ending the output to this part, you need to put a bracket here, which means that in order to circumvent the operator precedence, you have to use these brackets. So let's run this program as well. Again, I'm going to replace the class name, and as we have seen, there is this run method. So simply I can do this bools and run, and I will be able to see these things, right? So as we were talking, that these two things are basically same except this bracket part, and still the results are different. Here the result is true in this particular case, and here in this particular case the result is false, right? So you have to make sure that you are well aware of the operator precedence, and has more precedence as compared to the OR operator. Okay, so like this is the basics of Boolean. Let's move on to strings. So this is how you create a string variable. This is how you can produce the output or write it to the console. Again, on top of that, we also have characters. So a character variable can only hold a single letter or any symbol. Okay, so in strings you use these double quotes, but in character you use these single quotes, and a character cannot have more than one character. Okay, so if I do this, I will most probably get an error. Okay, so let me show you. Again, this is the strings class. Okay, the class name is string. So we will head back to our program and type this string. Okay, and run this thing. Okay, and it has produced the error too many characters, because here we have put two characters when it cannot contain more than one. Okay, now we can run this program again, and probably it will run fine. Okay, and as you can see here, now the program has produced an output. Okay, so your string is actually an array of characters. So you can also access the individual values at any index by this notation. So this is your variable's name, which is of type string, and then the index value. So indexes in C# starts from 0. So this is the 0th index, this is the first index, and this is the second. So most probably, so A2 is going to produce L. As you can see here, the output is L. Now you can also create empty strings. I do not have like many use cases where you can use this empty string, but if you want to use those, this is how you create an empty string. Okay, string.empty is simply going to create an empty string and assign it to the variable of your choice. This is a command. Okay, on top of that, we also have constant strings. So by putting this constant thing in front of your regular string declaration, you are going to make it a constant string which cannot be changed or assigned later on in the program. So let's suppose if I want to do this thing, const string, and I want to assign it to something else, I will not be able to do it, and I will get an error. So I am not able to do it. So those are constant string. We have already seen string interpolation. So in order to use any variable inside the string, you can place a $sign right in front of it, and then you can use these curly braces syntax in order to utilize the value of any variable inside a string. Okay, so as soon as the compiler is going to see this, it is going to come here, it will see that okay, this is a string interpolation or a string template, I need to process it, and the values will be plugged in for you you will get an output, and the output will be plugged here. Okay. Strings also have the length property, which means that since we have already talked that string is a collection of characters, so it is bound to have a length property because an array has a length property. Okay, so greeting.length is going to produce the total amount of characters that are there in this particular string, as we can see here, 12. Okay, now we can also construct strings from individual characters. So this is how you can create an array. I'm going to show you a little more about creating arrays and all in the later part of this video, but this is how you create arrays. So basically I have allocated or initialized the array with the initials of my name, right? So if I want to create a string out of this character array, I can simply do this new string and then pass the character array to the constructor. I will get a string out of it, which I can assign to any string variable, as you can see here. Okay, so string by default in C# are immutable. Okay, which means that if you are going to do something like this, we are basically appending this constant string to the greeting part. So basically what is going to happen under the hood is that this constant string is going to be appended to the value of greeting, and that new string will be allocated to this greeting thing. So we kind of have lost the original value that were stored in greeting. So a new string is created and that string is allocated to the variable. So this is how strings work. Okay. Then in order to create multi-line strings, this is the thing you have to append in front of the double quotes start, right? Then you can write your string normally and it will be printed. So don't forget to print this @ in front of your multi-line string, and as you can see here, it has produced the multi-line output. If I am going to skip this thing, I will simply get an error, and then C# won't be able to detect whether it's a multi-line string or what. Okay, so put a @ if you want to create a multi-line string. Then on top of that, we also have some utility functions that are available on variables of type string. The most common function is the substring part, where we want to extract some part of any string. So basically substring takes two arguments. This is the position it should start extracting characters from, and then this is the number which tells how many characters it should actually extract. As you can see here, we have started from 0 and it needs to extract 3 things. So we are basically asking it to extract from name. So name is what? Name is, let me see, name is most probably Rajat. Okay, here name is Rajat. So start from 0 and extract 3. So Raj. Okay, so this thing will probably produce Raj, as you can see here, Raj. Okay, starting position and the number of characters. Then we can also search whether certain substring exists in a string or not by using this index of. So if I want to search whether Raj exists in Rajat or not, I can type the variable name dot and then index of, which will search the entire string for the occurrence of Raj, and if there is any, I will get its index, or if there is none, I will get -1 as the result. Then I can use this -1 or the index position in order to get more information about whatever I'm going to do. Then we can also split a string. This is a syntax. I want to split it over the blank character. So let's suppose if I have a full name Rajat space Saxena, that will create an array of type string, and it is going to contain 2 strings, right? the first one will be Rajat and the second one will be Saxena. So as you can see here, hello, because we have split it out over space and the greeting words contains hello word. So we have got this thing because this thing is stored at the 0th location. Then again, you can also compare strings using equals. So string 1 dot equals, then you can also provide string 2 as the argument to this equals function, and it is going to compare the two strings and will show you whether these two strings are equal or not. So here the two strings, this one and this one, are equal, hence the output is true. So this is basically how you can deal with most of strings in C#. Let's move on to the other type, which is actually the enum type. Okay, so in this program I have used two types, the enum type and the tuple type. Okay, so let's first understand the enum type. So enum types basically are the types where you have certain items or certain predefined criterias and you want to assign these predefined criterias to something. So you want to tell the compiler that if a user is going to create a value or a variable of this type, this particular variable can only contain a value out of my predefined selection. As you can see here, I have created an enum of type categories and I have created these categories. So I just want to tell the compiler that there cannot be a third category which falls outside of these things. So I just want to tell the compiler that a user cannot assign any random category if I create a variable of type categories. Okay, so this is how you use enums. So the most common use case for enums is using enums for representing days like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, right? So there cannot be an 8th day, or to represent months because there cannot be any random 13th month. It has to be any out of those 12 predefined conventionally known months, right? So this is how we use enums. We are going to use enums here. And let's talk about the tuple type. So let's suppose you want to return something complex, something which is more than a simple string or integer. How can you do that? So let's suppose I am a person or there is a product. I have certain properties related to that product. So what's the name of the product? What is the category of that product? What is the price of that product? Now, if we look closely, all the data types for representing these properties of this particular products are different, but I somehow want to club these things and create a product, and this product should have these three properties, right? I can create a class, but I can also create a tuple. This is how you can create a tuple. Okay, so basically the product is going to be a collection of many basic types or any user defined types for that matter, and I am going to put it inside these parentheses, okay, and create a variable name. So this will define a tuple type. Okay, now here I have defined the value. So the machine oil is of type string, and as we can see, that's of type string. So there has to be a one-to-one direct mapping with the tuple types that are defined here and the actual values that we are using. Okay, so the machine oil is of type string, 23.99 is of type double, and categories is of categories.accessories is of type categories. And this is how we can use enums, right? I cannot do some random thing here. It will produce an error. So let's first of all plug this program, right? Tuples here. Okay, and run this thing. And it will not run. Categories does not contain a definition for random, which means that I have told the compiler that do not process anything out of these two things. So I have to do this only, or I can do parts. Okay, so yeah, this is how you can create tuple types if you want to access something or access a property on any tuple, you can call the names directly on the tuple. So product is the name of the variable. I will have name, price and category available on this product thing. So product.name will give me machine oil. Product.price will give me 23.99 and product.category is going to give me accessories, right? And this is again the string interpolation, and this syntax is kind of similar to the class syntax as well. So that is the reason I told you that we can use classes or we can use tuples. Tuples are basically, I guess, the newer constructs. Not many languages have these, but quite a lot of new languages or new updates to the existing languages come with tuples. Okay, so let's run this thing, .NET run, and as we can see here, machine oil 23.99 accessories, and we have got our output. So that completes the section about basic types. We are going to talk about user defined types in the next part, where we are also going to have a look at the object oriented programming in C#. So let's move on to object oriented programming. So this is a folder where I have collected everything related to classes and all, and the namespace is this thing. Most of C# chapters oops, and this actually mimics the folder structure. Okay, so as we have imported this namespace for using types, here we are going to use the namespace chapters, then oops, and then just oops, right, or classes, in order to use this program. Now the arrangement of programs here in this folder is different, as I have already also demonstrated here as well. So in this folder you have to locate for the driver class which has this particular run method. Okay, so these particular folders are going to have some other classes as well, but those classes are not runnable classes. You have to locate this driver program which is located in all three of these subdirectories. Okay, so if I want to run this program classes one, I have to go here, import the namespace up till classes, and then I can write driver run, and that will run my program. So let's dive into classes. So this is how you create a class. The namespace stuff is something you already know by now. Then this is how you create a class. This is a keyword to create a class. Now let's talk about the properties. So if I want to create a property, this is the, you can say, the access type. There are certain types like public, private, protected, right? So basically if you want to control the access to the member variables, here you write those things. So if I want to create a protected member, I will simply replace it with protected. Okay, so marking anything protected will make it only visible to its child classes. So by marking it public, I'm just telling that I want to use it everywhere. There is no restriction upon accessing this variable. Okay, so in order to create the getter setter, C# offers us something really good. This is this syntax. So in order to create a getter, you simply write this get, and in order to create a setter, you write this. If you want to create a read-only property, which means that you can only assign it once and it will not be assignable from the instance, you simply remove the setter method. You simply do not provide it. It will make this property a read-only property. Okay, This is a constructor. Again, the normal stuff. If you are coming from Java, you might have seen this. So most of this syntax is very similar to Java. This is a constructor. So if I want to initialize these properties when creating an instance of the class, I can provide these values, and these values can be assigned to these class or member variables, and then I will get the values here. And like most of the object-oriented programming languages, C# also has this concept of toString, which means that if I am doing console.writeLine over an instance of this class and I want to produce the output in a certain way, this is where I have to write it. So let's suppose when someone creates an instance of the class which is like this, so new person and this thing. So basically I am creating the constructor. So Rajat will be plugged in here and age 32 will be plugged in here. Okay. And this is a constructor which will assign this name thing to this variable and then age thing to this variable. And then I will get a object of type person, and that object will be having two properties, .name and .age, which I can access. Okay, so let's suppose I want to do this console.writeLine. By default, it is going to give me some random thing, but I want to create an output in certain form. That let's suppose I want to produce that whenever somebody writes this console.writeLine Rajat, it should first of all output my name and my age. I can define all of those things here. So here I have defined a template which should be used when this thing happens. So if somebody is going to call toString on Rajat, this is the output it is going to produce. Console.writeLine also calls toString under the hood, and since it calls toString, Rajat.toString is going to produce output from here. Okay, so let's run the program. We have already ran it, but let's run it again. So Rajat is 32 years old. This is the first line, and the output is coming from here, from toString. Okay, and if you want to access any property, this is how you do it. I can reassign the property. I have simply changed this A to E, and then I have reassigned this thing, and I can do console.writeLine and the value will be replaced. So this is a very basic example of how you can create classes. Now, a very common use case in object-oriented programming is extending classes. So we have extended this person class and we have introduced one new property to it, and that is the power. So a super person is supposed to have some power, right? So basically this is how you extend a class, this notation. So your class name and then the colon and then the class name which you want to extend. By extending class, we mean to say that whatever the class is doing, we want to add more functionality to it. Let's suppose there was a class which is doing something and I also want to introduce some new functionality to this class. I can create a child class, and this is the child class. It inherits certain properties from this person, and then on top of that it also has certain other properties which are unique to this class only. Okay, so this power property is unique to super person only. It is not there in person. It's a child class. This is the notation, and here you can say again this is a property, and it is also going to get two more properties from person, name and age. So in total this particular class has three properties. This is the constructor again. Now an interesting detail about the constructor here is this part. So basically we are taking in three inputs, name and age and power, because we want to initialize three things: name, age and power of this super person. We can pass the name and age to the super constructor by using this notation. and then simply assigning the other remaining properties one by one as we have seen in the person thing. So this thing will call the super constructor and automatically assign the corresponding values. So the name and the age of the super person will be assigned for us by using this notation, and then we are assigning power. This is how you create the constructors. Again, the toString part, we have used this override thing because this thing is having its own implementation, and when we have inherited from person, we have also inherited the toString method, and the person itself has also inherited this toString from the base class. So in order to override an existing method, we have to use this override keyword. So public override string and toString. This is something which I forgot to mention in the part where I was demonstrating classes, but this is something you have to remember. If you want to override something, you have to put this override keyword. Okay, so let's run this superperson class. Again, let's head back to our program, and instead of classes, we are going to import extending a class. A class. Yeah. Okay, this is the output, and the driver program is simply creating an instance of it and writing it to the console. And by writing it, we are actually calling toString method, and the toString is coming over here, right? One more thing is that we have imported person to this superperson class by using this using clause. So keep that in mind. If we remove this thing, it will start to throw an error that this person class cannot be found. If I try to run this program now, I will probably get an error stating that it cannot spot this person class. So make sure that you are importing classes correctly. Okay, so we have learned how to create classes and how to extend classes in order to create child classes. Now, most of the object-oriented programming also have these things known as interfaces. So basically, if you want to create a contract that whatever class that is going to implement this particular contract is going to have certain functionalities. So let's suppose I am going under a contract where I am bound to do A, B and C tasks. So I can create an interface for these A, B, C tasks, and whosoever is going to go under this contract is bound to process or carry out this A, B and C task, right? So in order to create such a contract, we use this notation interface. Okay, so interface mobility, that creates an interface, and that interface has two clauses that whosoever implements this mobility interface can walk and can run, right? I have created a new class which implements mobility. Now in C#, you cannot extend some classes and implement some interfaces at the same time. You can only either implement an interface or extend a class. If you are coming from languages like Java, you might have seen that you can have multiple levels of inheritance, right? You can extend classes and implement interfaces at the same time. In C#, you cannot do it. So we cannot just extend from person and then implement mobility. We can only implement from mobility or extend from person, right? So I have created this new animal class, and this is the namespace stuff. Again, the namespace name is different based on the folder structure. This is a new class, implements the interface. Again, the syntax is same. It is similar to extending classes, right? Then this is again the member variable. This is the constructor part, and this is where we have implemented the methods of this particular interface. So basically this is a contract and this is the concrete implementation of that particular contract, because since I actually implemented this particular contract, I was bound to provide the implementation of these functions. If I remove these functions from here, I will get an error that the animal class does not implement all contracts laid down by mobility. So first of all, let's head over to our program, change it to interfaces, because now we want to run interface program, and do this, and you will get to see this error: animal does not implement interface member mobility.walk and mobility.run. Hence we have to provide the concrete implementation of these functions. So this is how you use interfaces. This is very similar to Java. So with this knowledge, you will be able to create classes, create interfaces, and create child classes, and do various stuff that is related to object-oriented programming. And the intent is to only show you the basics so that you can just get by and be productive from the get-go. It does not cover the advanced stuff, right, like the reflection and all. So that concludes the object-oriented programming part. Let's move on to some other parts like arrays and tasks. So let's head over to the array part. Again, let's come to the program part, get rid of this thing, chapters and miscellaneous. Okay, and now I can run the array program by using this. Okay, does not contain the definition of run. Why not? Chapters, miscellaneous. Okay, this is not arrays. I made a typo. Simply I confused it with the keyword. Okay, so let's see how to create arrays. So this is how you can create an array of type integers. So it will be a collection of values, and those values are going to be of type integer. Okay, so we have to provide the total number of elements that are going to be there in an array, and this is the single dimensional array. We cannot skip this part. I cannot do this. You have to give the length of an array at the start or at the definition of the array. You cannot skip it. So it is a fixed length array, and if you want to assign anything, this is how you do it. So this is the index. Every index in C# starts from 0. So I am assigning something, this particular value 1, at the index of 1. If I do this, I will probably get an error because I have only created an array that is only 2 elements long. It cannot create an element at the index of 2 because that will make it an array of length 3. So that will be a no-op. If I do this, I will get an error. Okay, index out of bound, because my array can only hold 2 values, and this is the third value. If I do this, I will not get an error because now I am inside the bounds that I have defined here. Now I can also assign elements to my array at the definition. This is how you do it. So here I am creating an array of type string. So it is going to hold the name of the students that are there in the class. I have created a string array, and then I have also initialized it. So here I do not have to provide the length because the length can be inferred from the elements that are located inside these curly braces. So there are 2 elements. So my array is of length 2. Hence I have skipped providing any number here. So these are single dimensional array. Then there are multi-dimensional arrays, like you have seen those tables, right? Rows and columns. So if you want to create multi-dimensional arrays like a 2-dimensional array or a 3-dimensional array, this is how you do it. So here I have created a 2-dimensional array of type char. So any value that is stored at any particular place in this array is going to be of type character. So it is a 2 by 2 table, okay, and the very first character at this table is B. Okay, so you can imagine a 2 by 2 table, and the very first character that is located in the very first cell of the 2 by 2 table is B. This is how you make assignments to the multi-dimensional array. There is also one more thing that is known as jagged array. So basically it's an array of arrays, and it is different from multi-dimensional array. So a multi-dimensional array holds a value of type whatever that is defined, but a jagged array will contain an array at any particular location. So let me demonstrate. So here I have created a jagged array first of all, and it is of type int, right? So what do I mean by that? This thing will have 6 entries first of all, and those 6 entries are in turn going to be of type arrays. Okay, so marks 0 here is of type array of integer. Okay, so everything is going to be of type integer, but yes, every single thing that is stored is going to be an array. Okay, so it is more like that thing, one, and then if I can show you like this, array. Okay, so it is more like this notation. I'm just making a rough draft here. Okay, so everything is just an array over here. I hope I make sense here. So I wanted to create an array of marks. There are 6 students in my class. So every single element will be an array, and that array is going to contain the individual marks for subjects. Let's suppose like the first one represent maths, the other one represent science, and so on. So this marks 0 represents the marks obtained by any particular student in various subjects. And if I want to, access the marks obtained by student 0 in maths, I can do it by this notation. This is again the string interpolation part, and marks 0 0 is how I can access it. Okay, so just notice the difference in how we assign and access the variables in these two things. Okay, I hope I made sense here, because for new people it can be confusing. I got tripped up. I thought that jagged arrays were like the multi-dimensional thing. So make sure you understand this thing. Let's move on to task. So in most of today's programming, or in most of practical programming, you are going to make HTTP calls, or you are going to perform some CPU intensive functions, right, where you have to wait for the other end to complete its processing, and then it will produce some output, and once the output is ready, that will be returned to your program, which you can show or process later on. But you have to wait for the other end to be ready with the output, so it is going to take some time. So you can say the stuff happens asynchronously, right? And when any stuff happens asynchronously, you have to wait. For that, we can use task in C#. So most of the classes related to task functionality is located under system.threading. So again, we have created a class under this namespace, and let's suppose we have a long running method which adds many numbers. So it is going to take some time for it to produce the output. So I have called it a long running process. It is simply adding numbers from 1 to 100 actually, because counter is incremented here. So it is adding 1 to 100 and producing the output, but the catch is that it is taking some nap while doing that thing. So this thing takes some time in order to produce the output. So if I want my program to wait till the answer is not ready, I can use task so as to instruct the C# program that I need to wait. This is how you can create task. So basically you have to use this word await, which instructs the .NET runtime that whatever that is there inside this thing, we have to wait for it to produce an output. Do not produce this line or do not execute this line when this thing is not ready. Okay, so it will not proceed to this line. It will be stuck to this line until the output is not ready. So await task.run, and task is located under this particular module or package or namespace, whatever you want to call it. The syntax is, this is the lambda function and this is our long running function. So task.run is going to take a lambda function, and this lambda function itself calls our long running method. Our long running method is going to produce an output of type string, and this is why we have created a variable of type, this thing is going to create the variable of type integer. This is the reason we have created a variable of type int here. Okay, so this thing will result an integer output which will be contained here, and once the output is ready, then only this instruction will be processed. Okay, so this is how you create asynchronous task. Also, when you are doing this, you have to also mark your method as async. So if there is an await, the method should be marked async, otherwise it will not work as expected and it will also produce errors. So let's remove the async word from here and let's go over here and write what was there in the very start. Let me revert it. This card changes. Okay, let's come here and come here. Okay, so task.run, let's also get rid of this thing. Okay, task.run, and then we are also waiting, which means that first of all let's run this thing, otherwise it will create more confusion. Okay, as you can see, await operator can only be used within the async method, so we have to mark it async so that the .NET runtime can actually wait on it, and we have to mark it of type task because it is going to return a task, which means a promise in the future that it is going to do something, right? But as of now nothing is ready. You have to mark it task. If you are going to return something from it, then you have to use this particular notation, which is a generic notation. Let's suppose if I'm returning any value of type int from this task, I have to mark it int here. But since I'm not returning anything, I'm returning void, I have to use this task thing, okay, to the run method. Now over here I have called this task.run, and it is going to return a task which I have assigned in this t variable, and I have waited for it, which means that I have instructed the .NET runtime that let this thing get completed, and you should only terminate the main program when this thing completes. If I remove this thing, it will not produce any output because simply it is not waiting for the output to be ready. It is just simply starting the task in the background, and then the program gets over. There is nothing to be processed. Here by this t.wait, I am actually instructing the .NET runtime to wait on this task to get completed. And this task does its job, gets completed, produces an output. Then the .NET runtime will get the signal that this task has completed. Then only it will proceed further this point. And as you can see here, I will get an output after a certain period of time. So this is how task can help you out in doing the async programming. So if you are making some HTTP request and all, you are most probably are going to use task. So by that, we have reached to the conclusion of our little class about C Sharp. I hope that I was able to impart a little bit of knowledge about the basics of C Sharp, because the intent was to show you how to get started with C Sharp and what it is all about. Even if you are not interested in using C Sharp as your day-to-day language, you might have learned a thing or two about C Sharp, or whether you want to pick it up as your programming language of choice or not. I'm going to release a few more videos about C Sharp, so make sure to subscribe this channel in case you are interested in learning more about C Sharp. On top of that, I produce other technical related stuff or software engineering related stuff on this channel on weekly basis, so make sure you subscribe. If you have any doubts, if you want to chat with me, if you want to know me better, or if you want to interact with the community or be a part of a software development community, make sure you check out my Discord, where I am trying to create a community of helpful developers who are eager to learn new technologies and who exchange whatever they have learned with their network. So if you are looking for that sort of a community, make sure you check out my Discord link, which is provided in the video description. I see you guys over in the next video with something really interesting. See you.